Grace and peace to you. We start a new series today, the I Am series. Many of you may know the 7 I Ams. We are going to expand on that and have several other I Ams. There are several I Am statements that Jesus made. The first one is, I am the bread. It comes to us from John chapter 6, verse 35. And let us read this verse together. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. This is the word of God for the people of God. I am the bread. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am the door. I am the vine. I am leaving. I am the resurrection. I am coming. Jesus Christ, what does he say about himself? We know what the world says. We know what we say. But what does Jesus say about Jesus? I am. Some other questions we need to ask, some essential questions that the world asks, that people ask and have asked for all generations is, who am I and what is my purpose? Who are you and what is your purpose? Do you have meaning in your life? Have you found happiness? Have you found love? Is love part of who you are? Is peace part of your journey? Or is anxiety make up who you are? And worry and trouble? Who are you? And what is your purpose? It is something that's been asked of all religions, of all people, of all generations. In searching for the questions, who am I and what is my purpose? The Dalai Lama says, I believe that the very purpose of life is to seek happiness. It's from his Art of Happiness. Dalai Lama, rather popular religious figure in our day and age, giving guidance to thousands and thousands of people throughout our world, has many followers. Is this the purpose of life? To seek happiness? Is it the purpose of your life? Is it the purpose of my life? Ralph Waldo Emerson says the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Is Ralph Waldo Emerson right? Or is Dalai Lama right? What is the purpose of your life? Is the purpose of your life is to live and live well? Is it to be useful, honorable, and compassionate? Each of us are on a journey we call life. From the day that we're born to the day that we die, we're on this journey, trying to figure out what's our place in the world. It's definitely a struggle for those who are in or about the year 14, 15, and they struggle sometimes through their 20s, and sometimes I come alongside of people in their 60s and their 70s, and they still haven't figured it out. What is the purpose of life, and who are you anyway? We come to these questions, and we come to the question of who Jesus is. The faith questions that we have to ask is, who is Jesus, and what was his purpose? And if we discover that, what does it have to do with you and me? Who cares? Was Jesus just another person that lived, that tried to find his own meaning, try to find his own way, try to find his own happiness or his own compassion or his own use in this world? Or was Jesus something more? And if Jesus was something more, what does that mean to us as we try to discover who we are, as we try to discover what our purpose is? And as we can listen to preachers, we can listen to atheists, we can listen to scientists, all can weigh in on who Jesus is. The question I have today is, who does Jesus say that Jesus Jesus is. In this exchange in John chapter 6, Jesus gives what I would consider his greatest sermon. Now, I know the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is considered one of his greatest sermons. But John chapter 6 ranks right up there with it. It's a great sermon. And it comes from a question, what is the work that is required? That's the question that is asked of Jesus. Jesus, what is the work that is required? Now, what is going on here? What's behind the question? Why is the question being asked, and why are they asking Jesus? What is the work to be required? What is my purpose in life? That's really the question. What is it that I need to do with my life? Is the essential basic question that's being asked of Jesus. And Jesus responds by saying, the work is to believe in the one that he has sent. To believe in the one that God has sent. Who has God sent becomes the next question, not the question that's asked in John chapter 6, but that becomes the question that we all want to know. That's the beauty of what Jesus does. Jesus takes a question and he gives you just enough of an answer to make you want to know more what's coming up next. And when we read this in the context of it is, we can't read it in the context necessarily of the year 2012. In the year 2012, we have 2,000 years of history of Christian church and 2,000 years of people answering the question, who is Jesus and what is his purpose and what does that mean to me? But when we go back before the crucifixion, before the resurrection, before the Apostle Paul ever had his experience on the road to Damascus, before he wrote to the church in Galatia about the issues in Galatia, before John of Patmos had his revelation that he wrote down, somebody came to Jesus and said, what does God require of me? What is my purpose on this earth? And Jesus says to him, to believe the one that God has sent. That's the purpose. And so they all want to know, well, who's the one that God has sent? And then Jesus begins several sentences, several verses that's recorded in the book of John that has a lot of beauty to it. And one of the things that Jesus says is, he talks about himself, I am the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life. The bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. So let's unpack this a little bit. What in the world is Jesus saying? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Bread is a basic sustenance. Bread was a basic of the people of that day. How many people like spaghetti? Like spaghetti? Is spaghetti a bread? What is it? It's a pasta. Is pasta bread? Pasta is something different? All right, so he's not pasta. All right, how many like ice cream? Yeah, I like ice cream. Is ice cream bread? No. What is ice cream? It's a dairy. All right, he didn't say I'm the dairy of life. He didn't say I'm the spaghetti of life. He didn't say I'm the artichoke of life. He said I'm the bread of life. The bread was something that every person had access to, even if it needed to be shared from one to another. I am the bread of life. I'm the bread that gives sustenance. Well, what does it mean? Is he just talking about something that's at the dinner table? In John chapter 6, there are 6 times that Jesus mentions that he's the bread of life that has, and this is very important, come down from heaven. Now, when Jesus says something once, do you think it's important? If Jesus says something twice, do you think it's important? If Jesus says something 3 times, it must really be important, right? So, I'm not always real smart. But if Jesus says something 6 times, I kind of start to think, maybe I should go back and read John chapter 6 and maybe get that point. I'm the manna that has come down from heaven. I'm the bread that has come down from heaven. Well, I just used the word manna, didn't I? I jumped ahead of myself. I'm the manna that comes down from heaven. Now, when the people heard this, I'm the bread from heaven, those first century Jewish people who says, what is it that's required of God? Jesus says to believe the one that God has sent. And then Jesus says, I'm the bread from heaven. I'm the bread from heaven. When he says, I'm the bread from heaven, immediately they realize that Jesus is talking about, he is the bread from heaven. He is the one that is sent from God. Because they immediately go back to what story in the Old Testament? The Exodus chapter 16, when the people are wandering through the desert, the Hebrew slaves have left Egypt. They have crossed the Red Sea, and they're coming up to Moses, and they're complaining, oh, goodness, Moses, if only we had died in Egypt. Why'd you bring us out here to die? We don't have anything to eat. And so God provided manna for the people. And he provided the manna for 40 years. And every morning, at least 6 days a week, the first 6 days, they'd wake up and they'd look at on the ground outside their tents, and the bread had come from heaven. And they'd pick just enough for one day. On the 6th day, they'd pick enough for 2 days. On the 7th day was the Sabbath. There was no bread. But they had enough from the day before, from Friday to Saturday. By the way, Saturday is the Sabbath. A lot of people think Sunday's the Sabbath. We get confused about that. Sunday's the first day of the week. It's the day that we worship. Christians worship Sunday. Do you know why they worship Sunday instead of Saturday? Because the resurrection happened on Sunday. Absolutely. So I'm the bread of life. I'm the bread that has come down from heaven. Now, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Exodus chapter 16, verse 14. It's the first time they lay eyes on the bread from heaven. And it's recorded, when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. And we thought Kellogg's invented Frosted Flakes. You see that? It says it right there in the Bible. Thin flakes like frost. Frosted Flakes right there on the ground. And you always think of a loaf of bread, don't you? Or little pieces of bread. God gave them Frosted Flakes right there in Exodus. Isn't that great? I don't know if they had milk. If they had their goats, they had milk on their Frosted Flakes. The bread came from heaven. Day after day, week after week, year after year, God provided the manna from heaven. When did the manna cease? When they crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. From the day of Exodus 16:14 through the 40 years of wandering in the desert, when Joshua led the people into the Promised Land, the manna from heaven was no longer. So Jesus is sending a message to the people. They've asked him, what's required? Jesus is saying, what's required of you is that you believe in the one that God has sent. Well, who is the one that God has sent? Jesus says, I am the bread of life from heaven. So he's telling them, I'm the one sent by God. I'm the one that you have to believe. And so they're trying to puzzle through this, okay? Should we believe Jesus? Should we not believe Jesus? We're trying to think through this. Why should we believe Jesus? Just because he says he's the bread of life? We're still trying to figure this out. This is before the crucifixion. This is before the resurrection. This is before 2,000 years of church history. These are people who are really trying to figure out, is Jesus the Messiah? So they say to Jesus, what miraculous sign will you give so we may see it and believe you? Has anyone ever asked for a sign from God? God, I need a sign. I don't know which direction to go. I don't know what to do. I need a sign from you. And so this group of people put these billboards all over the nation a few years ago, and there's still some of them out there. And one of them says, well, you asked for a sign, God. Adam is a young man who I've come in acquaintance with here in the New Albany area who is really struggling. He was alcoholic. He was losing his job. He was losing all the things that he had going on in his life. And and he asked for a sign from God. This was a few months ago. He asked for a sign from God, and he went by a church sign here in New Albany, and the church sign said, "This is your sign from God." And because that church sign said that, he put his faith in God, and now he's turned his life around. He's turned his life around. He started going to that church. He started going to that church. He started listening to the sermon. He started trying to apply the principles, the godly principles in his life, and he's turned his life around. It's a wonderful testimony. I got to hear him in the fall. It's still not easy. He still struggles. He has not completely overcome all of his problems. But in order to be overcomers, we have to overcome the problems that we have, don't we? Now, when the people asked Jesus, "Show us a sign," you got to put John chapter 6 in context. You have to understand that when they're having this conversation, it's right after, it's the day after, right after Jesus just fed 5,000 people with a few loaves of bread and a few fish. Is that a miracle or what? I mean, we've got some people that explain that away and say, "Oh, everybody must have brought their own lunch," and then No. John records that there was a little boy that had his lunch, and Jesus blessed the lunch, and it fed 5,000 people, over 5,000 people. And so that happens, and then after that, Jesus goes out and he just happens to walk on the water. He just walks on the water. There's no big deal about that. He walks on the water. So you think a fellow that just fed 5,000 people with a few loaves of fish and just walked on the water, and you got somebody coming up to him and saying, "Why don't you perform a miracle for us so that we can believe that God has sent you?" You know, it's kind of like asking Jay-Z, "Prove to me you're a rapper." Or Mariah Carey, "Prove to me you're a singer." Or Tom Brady, "Prove to me you're a football player." Or Billy Graham, "Prove to me you're a preacher." I mean, what's Jesus got to do? He's walked on water. But yet the stubbornness of people want more. They want more. And it's almost like they want to be entertained. It's like, "Well, I know you fed 5,000 people with loaves of bread. I know that you walked on water, but, really give us a real sign." What's he going to do? Jesus doesn't give him a real sign. Jesus goes into a message about being the bread of life. And in the message, he gives 3 promises. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never go thirsty. And whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. 3 promises. Instead of performing miracles, he gives 3 promises. Now, we have the benefit of 2,000 years of church history. We have the benefit of experiencing God in our own lives. We have the benefit of putting our faith in Jesus Christ and knowing that God is faithful to keep all of his promises. But those folks weren't so sure about the promises he was making. They weren't so sure. But Jesus makes the promises, and Jesus keeps his promises, and those promises are as much for us today as it was for them. You'll never go hungry. You'll never go thirsty. And when you come to me, I will never drive you away. Have you ever been rejected by somebody? Have you ever been rejected by somebody you thought loved you? Have you ever been rejected by somebody that you poured your life into, your heart into, only to have them look at you and say, "I don't care about you," and walk away from your life? Is that painful? Jesus makes this promise, and we know that this promise is true. If you come to me, I will never drive you away. Matter of fact, he says in Matthew 28, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." 3 promises. And their response is, "Yeah, Give us another miracle. What more does he have to do? We have the benefit of the crucifixion and the resurrection. We know that Jesus kept his promise, that he loved us so much he died on the cross for our sins. We know from the testimony of the apostles and from over 500 people, as recorded by the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, that Jesus is resurrected, that he lives again and gives us hope for eternal life. We have the benefit of knowing that Jesus walks with us. Do you need another miracle in your life? The world today still struggles. The world today still struggles for meaning and purpose. The world today still struggles for identity. One of the soap operas that's out right now, it's popular, with the teenagers and 20s crowd, is Pretty Little Liars. Ever heard of that? Pretty Little Liars. Pretty Little Liars is all about everything a soap opera is about. Okay, it's a high school setting, and these two particular people in Pretty Little Liars, one of them's a student, the other one, the male, is a teacher, and they have a relationship you're not supposed to have. And it's glamorized. There's background music going on. It looks very appealing on TV. But the name of the show is Pretty Little Liars, and it's all about lies. And there's a song that I came across that is not a Christian song, but it has a lot of Christian elements to it. And it doesn't answer any questions, but it sure asks a lot. And so I clicked on the song and watched the video to go with it. And it was very interesting to me that the words of the song went with Pretty Little Liars. I can see the writing on the wall. I can't ignore this war. At the end of it all, who am I living for? That's the chorus of the song. Who am I living for? And there's this angst, this anxiety with the young female student about this relationship that she's in, that she knows is wrong. There's the anxiety with the male teacher who's in this relationship with a student he knows it's wrong. But still they have it. And there's scene in the episode where she's walking down the street in the rain, and he drives up by her, and he looks at her and she looks at him, and he drives a little bit further and stops, opens the passenger door, and the invitation is there. And everything inside me is screaming, don't get in the car. Don't get in the car. Don't get in the car. And I'm listening to these words. I can see the writing on the wall. I can't ignore this war. At the end of it all, who am I living for? Who am I living for? And I'm thinking, don't live for him. Just a TV show. But it's replayed over and over in the lives of people today who ask the question, who am I? What is my purpose? And who am I living for? The question is just as relevant today as it was when it was asked of Jesus. What is it we're supposed to do? What is my purpose in this life? What is my purpose in this world? And Jesus said, believe in the one that God has sent. She gets in the car. And what she will discover in that relationship is she will always be hungry. She will always be thirsty. And she will always be lying. Jesus says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. You will never go hungry. You will never be thirsty, and I will never drive you away. His relationship is everlasting. But most people in the world today chase relationships that are never lasting and empty. So Jesus tells us in John chapter 6, verse 40, "For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day." Jesus says, I am the food that will last. I am the food that will last forever. I am the food that will satisfy you. I am the bread of life. I am the one that gives life. I am the bread from heaven. You come to me and eat of this bread and you will live forever. Do you know the result of his message in John chapter 6? Do you know what the reaction of the people were? This crowd of over 5,000 that he had just fed. You know what they did? They all walked away. They all walked away. And his disciples were the only ones left standing there. And he says to the disciples, aren't you going to leave too? And their response is, to whom else shall we go? My prayer is that your trust is in Jesus Christ, the bread of life that has come down from heaven. Who are you? What is your purpose? You are a child of the living God, and your purpose is to have a relationship with the Creator of the world, an everlasting relationship. Your purpose is to get the bread from this God of ours who loves us so much that sent His Son Jesus Christ into the world. If you do, you will never go hungry, you will never be thirsty, and He will never drive you away.